This series of stories is intended to make you laugh, cry, and reflect on your own life. Enjoy a wonderful man, my dad, sharing stories from his life between the years of 1944 to the present.
A camping trip today for many folks means packing a pull-behind suitcase with a change of clothes for once, sometimes even twice a day. Finding a resort, spa, or fixed campsite complete with bath facilities and relaxing in a recreational vehicle or trailer for a short or not even so short duration of time. It was something less for those of us growing up some years back. Someone would say, "Let's go camping," and the first thing we thought of, "Where's that old tent?" There were a few particular spots that were favored over others, and they all had water involved. A lake, river, or even a slough next to the local swamp were all much highly chosen over anything else because instead of a restaurant, that's where supper had to come from. And of course, if it was the right time of year, a watermelon or three from a nearby patch. Only if a parent was involved in the preparations did boys often think of a change of underwear. The jeans we had on at the time would last for the 3 or 4 days we'd be roughing it. The items of importance were normally fishing gear, cooking utensils like skillets and coffee pots, tents and sleeping rolls, and of course someone who could get us to the campground and back home again. An older brother was usually handy to have in those days, but a friend who was old enough and could get the loan of an old pickup truck was the real ticket. Pickups then only had a bench seat for the driver and 2 others, but the wide metal bed that normally carried dirt, rocks, flowers of plants, toolboxes, shovels, rakes, limbs from tree trimmings, pigs, goats, crates of chickens, and dogs, could easily carry several adventure-seeking boys, and all the tents, bedrolls, fishing gear, cook pots and pans, canvas tops, and anything else needed to make a successful camping trip. An old grist mill outside of town was a favored spot I remember. It had an abundance of woods next to the flowing stream where the mill still stood at that time, and that stream had many brim, bass, bluegill, and of course catfish in it. Soon as we arrived, everyone began picking out a spot to sleep. Clearing an area of fallen limbs, rocks, and objects that would poke through your bedroll was very important. The need for being on a level spot was also a consideration, or sleeping in a damp area. If there was a new person in the group, everyone would watch to see if he was a quick learner of such things or if, like many, experience became the teacher. A mossy ground sure looks more comfortable. Mossy ground feels real soft when you put your hand on it, but when you lay your bedroll on it and lay there for a while, you don't notice the wet soaking up out of it until your sleeping blanket is soaked through and through. That's one lesson learned by new guys sometimes. The camp would soon be set, and often a fire would be burning, and of course catching supper was next in line. Hooks were baited, lines tossed out, and fish quickly caught and put on stringers. Moms and grandmas had provided cornmeal, flour, salt and pepper, and Crisco, along with our black skillets and pots, so it wasn't long before the camp had some of those brim and bluegill clean, coated with cornmeal and flour, and bubbling to a crisp coating in the hot grease. Some of the more adventuresome would try their hand at putting a fish that had been cleaned and split open on a green stick and propping it up by the fire, after declaring that that was how the Indians and early pioneers had done it because they didn't have frying pans. They were still waiting for their stick-impaled fish to be cooked enough to eat while we eagerly consumed our fried fish right out of the black skillet. Another lesson might be learned there. We didn't have ice chests then that had the ability to sustain ice for days. Most of us didn't even have ice chests that held ice. We had to carry water, not soft drinks, in whatever container we could, usually a 2-quart canteen that left a metallic taste to it. So if your campsite had a spring or well nearby, that made it much better. We thought ourselves more adult because we would often bring coffee to make with our meals. Now, getting the coffee to a drinkable condition was a real trial and error task. I'm not talking about putting a little cup made of plastic into a fancy contraption that filters spring-fed, aqua-filtered, mineral additive purified water to your cup of coffee. We had a black metal coffee percolator. Now, a percolator was designed in such a manner that water from the bottom half was boiled and pushed up through a metal tube to spill over into the top part basket that held the coffee grounds. Then it would drip back into the bottom half to boil again and make the journey over and over until the coffee was at the desired consistency or to your taste. Grandmas and moms instinctively know when to take the pot off the fire. Teenagers take a guess and usually have coffee that would dissolve a horseshoe. Even so, everyone around the fire would declare it good and choke it down to the best of their ability. At least we had spring water to make it more palatable. Sitting around a campfire almost always involves the telling of stories, maybe of a past camping trip or of a fishing trip that had been successful. Possibly a past hunting trip with a dad, uncle, brother, or adult friend who had been good enough to take you along on some kind of hunt. But very often the stories and tales would be the predictable ghost story. Now, when ghost stories are told, there has to be a certain amount of truth to them for validation. Living in the South, there's an abundance of believable stories that have been circulated for many years. One such story involves a depression in the ground not too far from the old grist mill. The smooth hollow is near a live oak tree that has seen many years and will probably stand for many, many more. The story tells of a notorious Yankee spy who had infiltrated Southern lines and was responsible for several successful raids and attacks that hurt the Confederacy. The spy had been identified and captured after a battle close to the area of the old grist mill, and the rebels had quickly judged him and found him guilty of his crimes and decided to hang him. The tree chosen was at that time a much younger version of the same oak, and being in the South meant that most everything else was pine. Nobody ever got hung from a pine tree. Anyway, they led him to the oak and threw a rope over a low-hanging limb. They pulled the noose over his head and watched as the young limb sagged along, allowing the victim to reach the ground with his feet. The young oak limb was limber enough that the victim could push up on his toes and avoid the constriction of the noose around his neck. The rope was pulled up more. No matter, the limb sagged just enough the spy could get his toes on the ground. Some of the frustrated rebels began to use their rifle butts and knives, dug the ground away from under the spy's feet, and in just a few minutes left him dangling, trying desperately to reach the bottom of a dug-out space left under him. They left him dancing and twitching on the rope, still trying with no success to push up on the ground that was no longer there. Today that oak still stands, and under it is a hollowed-out space on the ground where nothing will grow and surprisingly no water will stand. Fill it up if you like. Put in some dirt or sand. Pour water in it if you want to. Tomorrow morning it'll be completely empty and dry. It is said that the ghost of the Yankee spy still kicks his feet and cleans out anything put in the hollow below the oak tree. Go ahead. Try to fill it up if you like. I wouldn't wait to see if I were you. Some tales leave a few campers restless and unable to get a good night's sleep. Such a tale is the tale of Von Doon. Not much is known about the appearance of Von Doon, just that he, or it, is not an apparition you want to stumble on in the late evening hours. Back in the woods among the old limestone hills are several caves and hollows. Some are not much more than closet size, while a few go hundreds of feet deep into the earth. These are the lair of Von Doon, and many a story is told of campers, hikers, and those adventuresome enough to enter the cave, but not lucky enough to come back out. Back in the day before technology began to unhinge everything and everyone, family, friends, couples, and kids really enjoyed the outdoors. Just sitting on a porch was fun while others were involved. But more so when you could get adventure out to a spot well remembered for having a good time or an adventure that brought back memories. One such adventure involved two couples that had gone for a picnic in the woods somewhere near those limestone cliffs and caves. It had been a most enjoyable day with the right amount of cool breeze, not too hot a temperature for that time of year, and a basket of fried chicken, potato salad, and a chocolate cake to round it out. After relaxing a bit, packing up, the girls decided they wanted to explore one of the nearby caves. Both young men, having eaten more than a small amount to ensure that the girls knew how much they enjoyed it, were sleepily reluctant to start any kind of activity unless it involved a nap. Not to be denied their adventure, the girls wandered into the cave entrance with no knowledge of what was in store for them. About 50 to 70 feet inside the cave was still slightly lit from the entrance, but then a corner hid the light, and from there a torch of some type was needed. One girl urged them to go forward, and with a dare and giggles and laughs, the other was a bit more timid, but not wanting to be a spoiled sport, crept along holding the other's hand. Then, as they approached the dark corner where no sun lit the shadows, the girl in the lead said, "Why, that smells like our fried chicken. I bet those boys came in another way to try and scare us." And they rushed into the dark recess, laughing and crying out, "We see you! We see you!" Both boys woke from their nap and looked around for the girls. Neither knew anything except they had wanted to explore the old cave. Then almost together they said, "Oh, goodness, I'll bet they got lost in there." Quickly they ran to the cave and called their names repeatedly. They ran to the car and found a flashlight. Moving back to the cave and looking through the less than adequate beam of light, they searched from the dark corner into the gloom of the ever darker and damp cave. Soon realizing their light would fade entirely, they knew the only chance was to recruit help. They returned to town. People, eager to help, quickly got there as the cave entrance with flashlights and even some limbs with oil-soaked sacks for torches. As they began to make plans and try to advise each other, an older man came up and asked, "Isn't this the cave where Von Doon has been seen?" The only sound then was crickets in the nearby grassy field where a picnic had been held. Some of the volunteers sort of remembered some other tasks that had to be tended to. Others felt cold sweat running down their backs. Some others still made excuses to leave the cave entrance. One happened to say, "Hey, do you smell fried chicken?"